First, I'd just like to say on behalf of Meta, I want to thank you, AGHS, and the other organizers for giving us the opportunity to participate, and to my fellow panelists, and apologize for not being able to be there in person and joining virtually. I very much wish I could be there. As Osama said, my name is Frederick Rawski. I'm the head of human rights policy for the Asia Pacific region at Meta and part of a larger human rights policy team. Um, I joined Meta only in July of 2022, so I'm a relative newcomer, following on several decades of international civil society and UN work. That's my background as a human rights lawyer. Just say I'm personally honored to be part of the event. Asma Jahangir has been a role model and inspiration of mine throughout my career as a human rights lawyer, and I'm grateful we were able actually to briefly cross paths when I was at the International Commission of Jurists, where she was commissioner and then honorary commissioner for many years, and was one of those rare individuals that not only made extraordinary contributions to human rights in her own country, but is really played a crucial role in evolving international human rights law and standards, including through her various UN special rapporteur roles. You raised a number of issues, any one of which I could speak on for about 30 minutes, so I will just be very brief. I'll give a little bit of context on the human rights policy and then maybe touch on a couple of the points you raised, and if you'd like me to elaborate, I can do that later. But I did want to start by just saying that Meta has tried very hard to show its commitment to protecting human rights through action and not just assertion. First and foremost among that is the existence of the human rights team, of which I'm a part. And I know Usama and others here, I'm sure, have had contact with myself and other colleagues on the team in various contexts, and adopted a human rights policy. The human rights policy is relatively new. It was established in March of 2021, not so long ago. No policy is perfect, but we're quite proud of the fact that the company has committed to a set of policies that explicitly acknowledges and incorporates international human rights law, including the UN guiding principles. We're also I'm also quite proud of the fact that we've adopted the UN Declaration on Human Rights Defenders, broad and inclusive definition of human rights defender in that policy, which allows us a lot of scope to provide protections and engage with the specific protection issues that human rights defenders, written very broadly, face. In addition to the human rights policy itself, our community standards also incorporate human rights principles, as do other policies, such as misinformation, cybersecurity, election integrity. I'll digress for a second, since you asked about to say a few words about the actual policy and process that we take for assessing hate speech and similar types of speech. Our community standards prohibit a very wide range of potentially harmful content that includes violence and incitement, hate speech, speech from dangerous organizations and individuals. It prohibits various forms of violent and graphic content. And these policies apply to all content shared on Facebook and Instagram, regardless of who posts it, and are informed in various ways by human rights standards and international humanitarian law. We have sought, for instance, to adapt aspects of the Rabat Plan of Action and pool them into various content policy tools and frameworks in order to better evaluate speech attacking people and concepts, content involving state use of force, and a range of other issues. And not everything fits into that framework. I'll be honest. I mean, there are types of content that fall within the cracks or that may violate various policies, and we action in different ways. I'll preempt a possible question, which is in the Pakistan context, a blasphemous or allegedly blasphemous context, content often comes up. And while we don't have a quote unquote policy on blasphemy, we do assess allegedly blasphemous content against that full range of content policies that we have. And in some cases, we will allow content that may even violate those policies if it's newsworthy or if keeping it visible is in the public interest in some way or another. But we only do this after conducting a review that weighs that set of interests against the risk of harm, particularly the risk of physical safety and security. And we do, wherever we can, look to international human rights standards to help make those judgments. Misinformation is slightly different. Misinformation content or alleged misinformation content, we treat in some ways very similarly to other content. We look at it across our full range of community standards to assess whether or not it's violating any of those. If it is, we action it. If it doesn't violate those standards, and it often does, we will most often refer that material to an independent third-party fact checker, for which we have two in Pakistan, actually, or working on Pakistan. And they will make an independent judgment as to whether or not that content constitutes misinformation. And there are a number of tools that come into play if that judgment is made, including labeling, demotion of various kinds, or limitations on the reach of that kind of content. Disinformation, again, a bit different. When it comes to disinformation, we're focused primarily less on content and more on actors. Are these networks of individuals or groups engaging in what we call coordinated inauthentic behavior? Are they coordinated networks to promote misinformation on a particular topic? And we've got another set of policies and teams that work on identifying and investigating those networks and taking them down. So there are a lot of different policies that are implicated in addressing misinformation, and I'm happy to go into a little bit more detail about it. I'll just flag a couple of other more things about the human rights policy. We also engage in kind of advocacy, primarily through multi-stakeholder and industry forums. As Usama mentioned, we are a member of the Global Network Initiative, and we've committed to protecting expression and privacy against overbroad government demands, among other things, as a member. We also promote human rights through private and public advocacy, conducted by multi-stakeholder or industry bodies like the Asia Internet Coalition. I'll flag for you that coalition has issued a number of statements recently relating to Pakistan, including raising concerns about the human rights potential impacts of various pieces of legislation, as well as raising concerns about the disruption of internet services in Pakistan in the pre-election period. We're also members of the UN Global Compact, and we engage with various UN actors a great deal in that context. Lastly, my team is focused a lot on protection issues, on human rights defenders who will come to us with specific protection issues, either about the integrity of their own presence online or attacks against them, or there'll be a resource for us to help inform our decisions about how we're actioning content, identifying bad actors, understanding whether those bad actors are private, whether they're state-sponsored bad actors, whether they're a mix, and it's a complicated environment. We also run a human rights defender fund through an international organization called the Civil Rights Defenders, which gives emergency assistance to human rights defenders. I think we've now given assistance to about 500, largely in South and Southeast Asia. And last but not least, I won't go into it because we've got that expertise here on the panel, but the Oversight Board is also an integral part of our kind of human rights governance and framework. And the fact that the Oversight Board has adopted international human rights as fundamental to its own decision-making process is a very influential factor for us, excuse me. And many of those cases focus on how to find that correct balance between freedom of speech and safety, and to appropriately assess the context in which these things happen. And the board has recently delivered a decision on Pakistan as well, in which it upheld a decision by Meta to leave up a post that included the video of a speech before the Parliament of Pakistan, but also offered a set of other recommendations about how Meta can refine and improve upon its policies. I'll stop there, but happy to go into more detail if it's of interest into, for instance, how we assess and evaluate requests of government and others regarding a specific piece of content, or other aspects of what I've said. So thank you. And once again, very much appreciate the opportunity to be here and participate in the conference.
No, thank you for that helpful overview, Frederick. It's interesting, the politician whose speech that oversight board dealt with was actually speaking in the previous session, right right here at the conference. So this conference really does bring everyone together. You spoke about demotion of content, and in the current context, it reminded me, and I'm sure the audience is very curious also, how does the demotion, or colloquially it's called shadow banning, work? Because especially in the context of the Israel and Palestine conflict currently, a lot of people are complaining that when they post about Gaza or genocide or Israel, they're seeing that their posts aren't visible to everyone. And I know Meta has issued reports on this, and Meta has also done impact assessment, human rights due diligence and impact assessment on the Israel-Palestine issue. So maybe if you could shed a bit of light on how that policy works, and what should people expect? Should they not talk about the genocide on Meta platforms, or what is it that's obstructing their reach to their followers?
Thank you, Osama. So, my last remark was really more in relation to how we might treat differently content that's not violating our policies in any way, but has been assessed by independent third-party fact checkers as misinformation. In those cases, what I was trying to make note of is that we wouldn't block that content, but would rather label it, direct users to some fact-checking resources, and we would then not promote that content in the same way that normal, what we call organic content would be promoted. And I'm no expert in the operation of that process myself, but the intent being to limit or slow the reach of material that a third-party independent fact checker has determined to be suspect. When it comes to disinformation more broadly, where we've established that there are bad actors using inauthentic means to promote inaccurate information, then we action those networks rather than look at individual pieces of content. As for Israel, Palestine, and Gaza, I'm reluctant to get into great detail on it because I'm not the right person to speak to it. But I can say a few things, which is that we do not seek to block pro-Palestinian content on the platform. We assess that content against our community standards, as we normally do, and we action it accordingly. That said, yes, there have been allegations, a number of big reports suggesting that material has been suppressed in various ways, or our efforts at addressing it have been overbroad and have had a disproportionate impact on that speech. And there's some truth to that. I will say that the Human Rights Policy Team, in fact, commissioned an independent piece of due diligence a number of years ago about how we treat content in Israel and Palestine, and it did raise a number of issues that were recommended to us to address. There are a couple of explanations for how some of this might have happened. One is, drawing on that impact assessment, is a difference between how robust our language classifiers are in Arabic versus Hebrew. They're not the same, and a unintended consequence of that, could be that we capture more pro-Palestinian speech than other speech. Another aspect of this is that we have a dangerous organizations and individuals policy. Hamas is a designated organization under that policy, which means that speech that is supporting or praising Hamas does get taken down. That does sometimes capture content that should be protected and kept on platform. And in the aftermath of October 7th and the violence in Gaza, we did make some other adjustments in accordance with crisis policy protocol and other protocols in the company that I'm no expert here, but that one way to say it is it lowered some of the certainty thresholds that our kind of artificial intelligence mechanisms have before they, in order to identify something as hate speech or as bullying and harassment or as potentially inciting language, and pulls it down. And that's something we do from time to time in crisis situations or where we think that the risk of offline violence is higher than normal. But a consequence of that can be that more content gets removed than would be taken down under other circumstances. There's lots to talk about on this topic, and I would direct you to a couple of things. Human Rights Watch did a report in December, which we responded to, and they've published that response as well as part of the report, and you can see that. There are also 2 posts on our website which lay out some of this in greater detail. The policy changes and efforts that we put into place after October 7th. That's not to say there isn't controversy around these. There's a lot, but from the Human Rights Policy team side, we're engaged with civil society. We're engaged with UN bodies and other stakeholders to make sure that we do as good a job as we can in ensuring that politically protected speech remains on the platform, and that one group of people, particularly pro-Palestinian content, is not actioned at a greater rate than it should be. But it's hard, and particularly in these sorts of contexts, decisions, trade-offs are made no matter which way you go. Whether you err on the side of taking down more content in order to minimize the potential for offline harm, or you protect more content in order to protect and promote political speech at a crucial moment like this. So I'll stop there. But
No, thank you.
To dig